Welcome to the second video of Unit 8. The second video's focus is going to be on Japan, including the geography, the religion, the politics, and the social structure of Japan in the early years of its development. So we'll start with geography. Japan is located in Eastern Asia and is considered to be an archipelago. An archipelago is a chain or group of islands. So another good example that you're probably more familiar with would be Hawaii. Hawaii would be an example of an archipelago, just as Japan is. So here we have China, here we have Korea, here we have Japan off the eastern coast of Asia. And it is a collection of many different islands, making it, again, an archipelago. About 4,000 islands make up the archipelago of Japan, stretching over about 1,200 miles. Most of the population is on the four main islands, which are shown here on this map. Japan's islands are mountainous, volcanic islands. So not all of the islands are able to be settled on, particularly in the volcanic areas. And you can see on the map here, the brown areas, the darker brown it gets, the higher elevation, meaning the more mountainous. Japan's geography has positives and negatives. On the positive side, they are far enough from the mainland to avoid most invasions. So in the early stages of development, people would invade other areas that were up and coming so that they wouldn't one day be a threat. But Japan was far enough from the mainland that nobody really sought after that land to kind of take over. They were also close enough to the mainland to trade, so they're far enough to not be a threat, but they're close enough that they can still trade goods over the sea. They have a warm climate, which is good for people as well as for crops, and lots of rainfall helping with the same thing, for people to have access to water and for crops to have access to water. Some of the negatives is that only about 15% of land is suitable for farming because of the mountainous volcanic geography. Their natural resources are limited, like iron, coal, oil, because they're islands. And islands only have so much space and so many resources, so a lot of things they're going to have to get from elsewhere. They're going to have to import. And they're subject to natural disasters. Examples of some of the natural disasters they have to deal with in Japan include typhoons, earthquakes, tidal waves, and tsunamis. In early Japanese history, Japan was very fragmented in terms of their geography as well as their development. Because of the fragmented geography, people really didn't interact with one another in the early development. So there wasn't an empire that formed with the bringing together of every person until later in its history. Instead, a lot of small clans fought each other for both territory and for resources. Each clan worshipped its own nature gods and had respect for their ancestors. These beliefs formed into Japan's earliest religion, called Shinto. Shinto means the way to the gods. This remains today to be one of Japan's two major religions. Shinto has no complex rituals or philosophy, but is based on respect for ancestors and respect for nature. Around 500 AD or CE, many Koreans moved to Japan, bringing Chinese ideas and technology with them. So Korea is in the circle there, and you see the arrow showing their movement from Korea to Japan. Japanese adopted the Chinese system of writing, government organization, architecture, and artwork. So there's a heavy Chinese influence in early Japanese history. Chinese missionaries also spread Buddhism into Japan. Japanese emperors adopted Buddhism as the official religion of Japan in the 700s, and it remains today to be one of the two major religions. Buddhism is one, Shinto is the other. Shinto and Buddhism coexist in Japan. Japanese blended many Shinto ideas into Buddhism and vice versa, meaning many ideas of Buddhism into Shinto. The Japanese government, the Yamato clan became the most powerful, and descendants of its family became the emperors of Japan. So the emperors meaning at the point that they had formed into an empire. Most of the time, the emperor only had ceremonial power, while other government officials or a warlord, called the shogun, had the real power. So the emperor was kind of like a figurehead. The emperor was still worshipped as a god and is the official head of the Shinto religion. But politically, the emperor held little to no actual power. Japan also practiced feudalism, very similar to the feudalism we talked about when we talked about Middle Ages Europe. Because of the unstable and violent nature of life in Japan, feudalistic arrangements developed. Again, just like in Europe. So this is the way that Japanese feudalism was established. The emperor would be on the top. He was on the top of society but had little real power. The shogun is this individual shown here. The shogun is the actual ruler of Japan, the one who holds all the power. And then the daimyo were wealthy landowners. The next level down are the samurai, Japan's equivalent of the knights in Europe. So they were Japan's warriors. Further down, the largest class is going to be peasants and artisans. So peasants are going to be doing a lot of the manual labor and artisans creating things like pottery. The lowest class are going to be merchants because they produce nothing on their own. So in terms of numbers, they're not going to be the largest class. However, they are on the bottom of society because in Japanese culture, it is valued to produce things on your own, and merchants don't. A merchant's job is to trade goods produced by other people. So merchants were actually looked on very poorly in Japanese society during the feudal era there. So we'll break it down here. At the top were the emperor and shogun. The emperor had symbolic power and the shogun controlled the military. The daimyo were local landlords and governors of plots of land. They were responsible for maintaining order and collecting crops and taxes. So they were very much like the nobles in feudal Europe. The samurai were professional warriors who served the daimyo and protected peasants in exchange for food and money. Again, very much like the knights in feudal Europe. The peasants grew food and gave a portion of their crop to the daimyo in exchange for protection. Again, very much like the serfs in feudal Europe. The difference between a samurai and a knight we're going to go over here. So they serve the same purpose in terms of defense, but a samurai lived according to a code of honor called bushido. They valued bravery, loyalty, fairness, reverence or respect for the gods, and generosity for those weaker than them. They expected women to live up to the same values that they followed. And they fought with bows, arrows, swords, and leather or iron armor. In contrast, the knights of feudal Europe lived according to the code of chivalry. They valued bravery and reverence to God. They showed humility and respect to women. They regarded women as weak creatures to be defended. And they fought with broadswords, lances, chainmail, or plate armor. So the knights fought with different types of weaponry and defenses than the samurai. And they had different codes of conduct. So this is the end of the video for the Japan notes and the end of the second video of Unit 8.